What's up? It is CLT Buyers Power Hour. Michael, we made it another week. Actually, it's been a couple weeks since we've done Power Hour. So there's a bunch of updates for all the InstaWeb folks. We have had a crazy couple of weeks.
It's been a lot of minutia. It's been a lot of admin. It's been a lot of communication. It's been a lot of tying up loose ends,
Lots of that.
which has been cool because it's been busy, but it hasn't felt overwhelming because the first half of the month when we were trying to get all the funds together to take down the properties was kind of the heavy lifting, and this felt more like just making sure everything finished smoothly. But as we'll get into a little bit, one or two of these deals was not a smooth landing, even though it landed, right? So it has been
Everyone got on the ground safely, evacuated. No injuries,
no
but
injuries.
not
Oxygen masks were not lowered,
but
but
not a comfortable ride.
it was not a comfortable ride. That's right.
Maybe we talk about logistics first. So, you guys got to go to the Self-Directed IRA Summit in Raleigh. So we got to go, and you were specifically on a panel talking about our experience as operators, and we've got to talk to a lot of people who are interested in the space, both being directly involved or indirectly involved or passively as investors. So lots of conversations were had kind of around that. Maybe we can talk about that experience for a minute, and then we'll talk about operational stuff in the business.
Yeah, sure. So Christina and I went to Raleigh this past weekend, Directed IRA, and our buddies Matt and Nate and Lindsay and everyone over there held a summit on different ways to utilize retirement accounts for investing in things outside of the typical stocks, bonds, mutual funds, things that Schwab and Fidelity and Ameritrade and all those other places offer. So it was a really cool opportunity to connect with people who have funds in retirement accounts who are a little bit more on the active side of investing, meaning that they may not want to be operating every piece of an investment when it comes to real estate specifically, but they want to have the choice of which investments they're in. The security with real estate offers benefits that other investment areas don't. So just having a lot of conversations with people who are interested in getting more tangible investments and more just being a part of things that they can put their thumb on a little more.
Yeah.
So this weekend was great. We saw a lot of people from the Charlotte space there, other operators. So, we saw Devin, we saw Ben and Tiff in Greensboro, we saw Eric and Freddie, we saw Jamie and Jess. Like, we saw a lot of people out in Raleigh that
a lot of our friends who we see in the space.
Absolutely. They were trying to do similar things as we were there, raising private funds and building relationships. Went really well, had some good dinners, had some good conversations, had some follow-up emails, and even a couple meetings this week with some potential lenders. So overall, the weekend was a pretty strong success, especially coupled with the fact that you successfully completed your Ironman on the same day. So it was just like a bunch of milestones being completed all at the same time. And it was just really cool to be a part of it, be in a room where people are actively learning and absorbing new information, and at the same time putting some conversations, into the future where you can be a part of them since you weren't there last weekend and get to know these lenders and build those relationships as well. So super successful.
Before we move off that, what was maybe your favorite insight you got to share during the panel, or what was your favorite question that came up, or what was the key takeaway I think you saw there?
So when I was on the panel, that was the only panel that was specifically geared towards real estate. A lot of the other panels were talking about asset protection, talking about proper ways to fund your IRA, tax strategies, things like that. So it was already cool to have a little bit of a niche in the presentation about just being one of the 4 people on stage talking real estate. Security of capital really came up during that point, and there was just a really robust discussion on fractionalizing notes versus positioning notes.
Yep.
And that was a really big takeaway because you and I both know that we've done first position leans, second position leans. We've also done fractionalizing. So we've been on both sides. But from a lender side, them knowing that they have the security of half of a first position note versus all of a second position note is something they're looking for.
Yeah.
And being able to describe fractionalizing out notes and reinforcing to them that their capital is literally as safe as it could possibly be in a lending style situation helps you just have more ammunition in your pocket in terms of making the lenders feel that they can trust you.
Love
So
that.
that was a big takeaway. Other than that, there were some really cool things people were doing in terms of commercial real estate deals and flipping Rite Aids, and some other really cool stuff was talked about. But generally speaking, I felt that the majority of people at this conference left with an understanding of not just ways to invest, but ways to mitigate risk and get as much security into their investments as possible, which is exactly what it should be.
Love that. Love all of that. Again, the caliber of event that the team at Directed IRA puts on is, I think, definitely industry leading. And so it's fun to be able to be involved with things like that.
Yeah. I talked to a couple, we've been to a couple of these events, maybe not quite the dispersal of custodians. We've been to quite a few events over a couple custodians, but I talked to some people at this event, really just getting their feedback on what they thought of how Directed IRA did, the education that they're offering without it being investment advice, because self-directed custodians are not allowed to suggest things, right? They said it was miles above anything else that they've ever been to. And there's incredible information at these events. And I think regardless of the custodian you're with, they have access to get you some pretty good information. But Matt and Nate and Lindsay and Mark and everyone that was at this event, they were just so approachable. They're so easy to get in touch with, especially being the people who are the managing partners of this, corporation or whatever you want, custodian, whatever you want to say. They have very high responsibilities, big jobs, and they made it very easy to come and talk to them and follow up with them and have a conversation. So if you're looking for someone to support you on your investment journey, I really can't think of a team that has more resources and gives more time than the Directed IRA team. I really can't.
Perfect. I think that those events are so important for our business. So yeah, as you mentioned, you guys were kind of going through a gauntlet of a day.
That's right.
You guys had a lot of networking to do and a lot of different things. I did have the opportunity to run a half Ironman triathlon the same day. I'm not sure which of us had more fun, but I did get it done, and definitely very, very proud of that result.
How long were you training for this one?
Over a year. Yeah. 400 and something plus days. Yeah.
The same amount of days that you hadn't had a Pepsi, right?
Something on that scale.
On
Yeah.
that scale.
So I ended up, for the viewers at home, I ended up having a Pepsi, but the count was at 445 days since I'd had my last one. And everyone was saying, it may not taste it. No, it tasted fantastic. It helps. My mother-in-law had made pozole, which is one of my favorite caldos. It's a soup. And then I had the Pepsi with that, and the pairing of those are a fantastic taste together. So definitely helps.
So next time on a cold day or when I'm super tired, I got to go pozole and Pepsi.
The double P's there. Peas? Right. Definitely. That's a go-to.
I'll be coming by the Pew household next time that happens, because that sounds good. But really proud of you.
Thank you.
You've been working at this a really long time. You cut out soda, you changed your diet, you hired a coach.
Kind of changed my diet. We probably could have gone further.
The amount of times you had to order double protein was more than I've ever seen before.
That's true.
Needless to say, you're a busy guy. You stay busy, and the fact that you were still able to find all the training time to get this done and do it at the time that you were hoping to get done is really, really cool, man. So
Thanks.
Really proud of you.
Thanks.
I don't know who celebrates their birthday weekend by putting themselves through so much pain and punishment, but I know that the finish line was worth it.
Yeah.
And you'll find time to celebrate at some point. So
For sure. One cool thing, I did hire a coach, like you mentioned, so shout out to the team at the starting line. But they did help me shave a full hour off of my completion time. So I set a PR by a full hour, and that was pretty cool.
what's the next PR going to be?
Yeah, we're not going to talk about that. In fairness, when I completed the first one, I think my exact words were, "I'm never effing doing that again." I didn't at least say those words as I crossed the finish line, so that was an improvement.
I think next time we're just going to have to get to a full instead of a half.
Oh my gosh,
But
I don't know.
we'll
about
get
that.
there.
I don't know about that, but
Personal goals as well as business goals, right?
that's
But
right.
needless to say, just to harp again on the point of the kind of partner that Ed is, he actually found time mid-race on Saturday to text me and wish me good luck on stage. So the fact that he paused what he was doing just to think about how we're doing over on the business side of things is, in my opinion, all you really need to know about Ed. So thank you for that.
Now you're making me embarrassed.
You should be embarrassed. You're a little softy. We were talking about this yesterday. There were
Yeah.
2 softies in the room yesterday.
It's true.
But
It's true.
but needless to say, it was a great weekend. A lot of time spent building future relationships, and hopefully we'll start to see the fruit on some of those trees rather shortly.
Absolutely. So let's move on to what's happening in CLT buyers as an operational bit. Like,
We could do that, but we have a question.
let's hit the question first.
Question is, how do you start to build relationships with lenders? What does the initial station look like?
Got it. Okay. You want to take that?
I'll take that. I think, why don't I take it from what kind of happened this weekend?
Sure.
And why don't you take it from I'll take it from people who are looking to invest,
Yep.
and you take it from the people that maybe haven't shown that interest
Love that.
previously. Okay. So at this event, everyone there had a directed IRA or is considering opening a self-directed IRA. So these people are actively looking for investments. So it's really not hard to start the conversation with them because you know what the end goal of them being there is. Now, you don't know if it's going to be you or somebody else or even the discipline that you practice, but they're here because they either have money or want to start earning more money to start doing other things. So those conversations really just start off with, hey, it's nice to meet you. What brings you here? What are you looking to accomplish this weekend? Is there anything that I can do to help? Do you know the people here? Can I introduce you to anybody? How can I connect a bridge to help you get your goals completed more quickly? It doesn't have to be with CLT buyers. I talked to people that were struggling to find attorneys that were comfortable with creative financing. I was able to give them our 3, preferred attorneys right there on the spot.
Right.
So that was first thing I want to do. Offer value, nothing in return, just here to find out about you and what you're looking to do. Then over the course of follow-up communication, because it's networking all the time, so you see the same people a couple times. That's when it's, hey, I did bring a couple examples of deals we've done in the past. I'm happy to show them to you to at least get an understanding of what working with us or someone like us looks like. And basically you just see at that point whether or not they nibble on the hook, they fully bite it, or they say, I like squid, not worms, and I'm going to go somewhere else.
So I think one of the things that's cool about being at like the self-directed IRA conferences, different events like that is we have developed an ability to do something that this community of people don't know how to do, which is to find really, really great real estate deals. So you and I were on a call this morning, and the first question that got asked is, wait a minute, Michael, but how do you guys make money? How do you operate a business, and how is this productive for you? And we were able to share that we're able to find real estate that's being sold at a discount to market, and that generally that spread is significant enough for us to want to do deals, and that's what has that drives value for us generally. And that's a unique skill set for the people who are in that room. Now, you and I are going to be in Las Vegas next week with our mastermind community. That's not a unique skill set in that room,
That's
right?
That's right.
So it depends.
Even though there are lenders in both rooms, right?
That's right. And so it depends on which room we happen to be in where the skill set is unique. So when we're in the self-directed IRA conference, the unique skill set is we can develop and find off-market opportunities. When we're in our mastermind community, it's interesting. Our ability to raise capital is one of the more unique skill sets, and we'll share our expertise there. So being able to play in both spaces is a lot of fun, and one of the competitive advantages I think that our team at CLT Buyers has.
Yeah, it's kind of the blue ocean, red ocean discussion, right? And one of the interesting things that even I kind of realized a little bit during our conversation right now is a blue ocean can also be a red ocean, and a red ocean can also be a blue ocean. And the fact that, if I'm trying to raise capital at a directed IRA conference, that's a red ocean in terms of everyone is trying to get access to the lender's funds. But due to the fact that I'm one of the few operators in that space that does real estate compared to other investments, the red ocean of all the sharks are trying to get to my blue ocean of opportunities in that same ocean.
That's right.
So it's just, to your point, it's not necessarily just the service that you offer, but it's what room are you in?
Mhm.
And that can change your pitch, that can change the types of conversations you try to grow, that can change your speed to act, speed to close, all those good things.
Yep. Perfect. I think we're getting a couple of comments, so let's just read through those real quick. As someone who works with someone who works with builders and real estate agents, I often come across clients that talk about wanting to invest in other rental properties but don't know how to get involved. That's exactly right. Jonathan's someone who's in the community, and he works a lot with investors on their retrofits and the retail space. So that bridge of, we know where a lot of investors are and where to find them and how to connect with them, but a lot of people don't. Facebook is always a very common tool. We recommend that to a lot of people. That's a great starting point. And then Jonathan continued with, if I want to be
that connection for them, what would you suggest I start doing to get that going?
Oh, I mean, Jonathan's one of the people who are doing this well, but would be well served to do it more at scale, which is just continue to make those connections more regular. Continue to be known as a resource in that space, and that takes putting yourself out there and doing some of that work. So.
We had a conversation this week with a guy that does this exact thing. He knows lenders and he knows operators, and he doesn't want to be the specific person in either one of those seats, but he plays the connector.
That's right.
And then takes a small fee for the purpose of bringing those two together. And that's beneficial on so many different levels, because the work is done by the connector. The relationship is built by the connector. The communication is handled by the connector. So in essence, it's kind of like a wholesale fee. You're paying a fee for the access to the lending, just like you're paying a fee for the access to the contract. That can be extremely valuable, and especially in terms of tight time horizons.
For sure.
So yeah, definitely do that more if you can, Jonathan.
So the last couple of weeks since we've been in Power Hour have been very productive for CLT Buyers. So let's see if we can run through it. We bought a property from the courthouse. We purchased a sub 2 in Kannapolis. We purchased another property in Charlotte that is going to be a communal living. The first courthouse purchase, that's going to be a retail flip. We purchased a property in Gastonia and then immediately sold it on seller financing. all over the last
20
three-ish,
days.
all in October.
That's right.
Um,
We also have another one closing on Monday.
Yep. One
And-
more that'll be a flip for a traditional long-term rental. That'll be a pretty basic flip on that one. So we've had a lot of moving parts. Do you want to talk about any of those deals specifically? Any of the nuances of them?
There's one I don't want to talk about, but that's probably the one we should talk about. Shout out to Adam Compagnon. So we had this deal in Gastonia on a street called Ranlow. It was a wholesale deal that we found an end buyer for. And due to many unforeseen circumstances, that deal got daisy chained to other wholesaler, to another wholesaler, to another wholesaler, and then finally to the end buyer without us knowing more than a day before close. That ended up, of course, not closing on time due to the telephone tag game that was being played and not knowing who was the person of contact, etc. So for the last 3 weeks, which has all been extensions due to the fact that it didn't close on time, we've been trying to go back and forth with the true end buyer and dealing with the investment company that was working with him to try and get this closed. There were multiple walkthroughs needed after the fact. There was a lot of taking people on their word without a lot of hard paper evidence to prove that things were happening the way they were saying. And there was probably 3 or 4 times alone on this deal where you and I looked at each other and we were just ready to pull the plug.
Yeah,
It was this was a deal where it was not a normal wholesale deal. This probably took 3 to 4 times the amount of effort and time that a normal wholesale deal does.
Yeah.
But we ended up basically praying for a Hail Mary. The deal was all but done in terms of falling apart. And then during the middle of Friday afternoon, we finally got confirmation that wire had been sent and the buyer was on the way to the attorney to sign the docs.
Right.
And I remember I found out about it right before the networking at the event started, and one of the first people that I ran into at the event happened to be one of the guys on the investment team on the other side. So we were able to connect and
laugh about it,
but 2, it allowed me to get a little bit more of an understanding of just how hard they were working on the buyer side of it as well. And that was nice to hear, because there were a couple times during this transaction where it felt like some things maybe weren't getting done that truly needed to. And after talking with these guys, we could tell how difficult of a time they were having as well. And the fact that we were able to kind of mold the minds together and get this done where everyone is happy is a massive win in our book, even though monetarily wise, it's not a huge deal for us.
That's right. So the deal almost fell apart. We ended up purchasing it directly, and then we sold it on seller financing. And I think if not for it being our team involved in this deal and driving it on the side, and then Kerry Williams and Gerard and Ray over there driving it on the buyer side, and their level of professionalism, I don't think this deal gets done. Absent that, razor thin line we had to walk there, but thankfully we got it done. This is one that'll be a case study that we'll talk about in the future. But definitely the important time that it took internal to our team, at the attorney's office, on the buyer side, probably the most time we've spent on any individual deal since the formation of CLT Buyers, I would guess. So
recency bias for sure, but it's definitely one of the ones up there.
Yeah.
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
Got a question. In the future, what would you do differently
About that deal?
about this deal?
Yeah. So there's really 2 things that happened in the transaction that I think we had control of. The first is when our deal was getting daisy chained, which is part of what caused the deal to really become difficult. You have different parties saying different things to different people, and so that's why that's not ideal, and why people don't prefer to have their deals daisy chained. We didn't confirm that the name on the wire matched the name of our contract.
So I'm answering my own question, but so we saw the money come into the account,
Into our attorney's
attorney's escrow,
Yep.
which is confirmation that buyer has sent funds. The fact that buyer sent funds must be good
right.
to continue moving forward with this transaction. So what actually happened there?
Yeah, so it turns out that one of the buyers, really the end buyer, the person who became our trend buyer, is the one who put that money as a deposit, and then every other person in the daisy chain was using that deposit as their non-refundable deposit, which doesn't leave us in really good standing, effectively.
That's right. So, okay, so the number one thing that we would do differently in the future is we actually had a power hour. Let's call it a powwow on Monday to hash this deal out and talk about what went wrong and how to fix it. Number one that we came up with is we put an SOP at the name. The contracting party on the assignment agreement has to be the exact same party on the wire receipt. So that doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be an LLC if there's a personal name that's on the assignment contract, but those two have to match. That's really big number one. Number two is we are going to be putting some things in place that just make it a little bit more difficult moving forward for deals to be daisy chained. Something with needing our expressed written consent to allow that, rather than telling people that they can't and then they go and do it anyways. So those were the two big things. I also really think that just consistent communication with your paralegal, making sure that they have all the paperwork up to date, asking them if there's been any updates that are foreign to a normal transaction, will all be beneficial in just keeping you in the loop. If this had happened earlier, if we had noticed this earlier in the transaction, would have been much easier to save. But because we didn't find out about it until 2 days before we were supposed to close, that really changed the scale of our involvement in getting this deal closed.
And then I think the last thing, and we've talked about this, is once it was discovered that we were kind of in this situation where it had been daisy chained, getting direct communication with the end buyers sooner in the process would have been more effective as well.
Yeah, and we've talked before about how when we're doing a JV agreement, right, there's the party that's responsible for the seller, and then there's the party that's responsible for the buyer. If you theoretically want to be earning your fair half of the money, you got to be carrying your fair half of the weight, which means managing that side of the relationship. There are times where maybe that relationship isn't being managed the right way. And I don't mean to say that the relationship between the other party and the buyer isn't strong. I'm sure it is. But in terms of clarity of communication, we moving forward want to have direct access to communication with the buyer.
That's right.
And if that doesn't mean I'm going to take over. It means you CC me on emails.
Yep.
You put us on text chains, rather than this is what they said, so now I'm telling you in different words.
Right.
That's just something that we can do to alleviate these problems. And I guarantee you we will have people that push back on that. And those might just choose we might just choose not to do business with those people moving forward if that's how they choose to act. I don't know.
That's it. Okay, so moving off that deal, we had the opportunity to do a very simple deal on the communal that we're buying in Charlotte. Walked that property. It was in better shape, I think, than we expected. We walked the subject 2 up in Kannapolis.
Also a communal.
Also will be a communal. It's a brick ranch home with a large basement, an unfinished basement. So finishing the basement is going to be the major lift there. That'll be exciting. So we got to walk that with our contracting team this week.
Yep.
And then the courthouse purchase, which is probably one of our favorite ones. So we walked the property and actually have started the clean out effort. Maybe the most interesting thing about that property is when we purchased it, there was a significant amount of dog feces in the property. So shout out to the team at Griffin for coming in and doing the clean out.
Check out Griffin's Instagram page if you really want to see what the inside of that house looked like. But this is not abnormal. It's gross. It's a little extreme. But when I tell you, if it's not dog feces, it will be newspapers. If it's not newspapers, it will be paint cans. Like there's always something, an extreme amount left at these homes. But when you're dealing with animals or other things like that, it can get a little dicey.
Yeah. So we're throwing that Griffin hauling and removal. You guys can check out the tags on Facebook or on Instagram. You'll see them. But definitely check that out. The team got over there and did a great job. The house that we purchased, again, through the courthouse, it had dog feces for sure, but then it also had just personal items in the home. Maybe not to the greatest hoarding level that we've seen in some properties, but there was a large number of personal items that had to come out of the home as well.
Yep. A little structural stuff with some of the floors. There's a reason that this house sold at the courthouse. And it's a heavy lift, but it's potentially heavy reward as well. So we're excited about this project. Great area of Charlotte, and
1990 build. It sits on a cul-de-sac right off the Greenway,
right around 2,500 square feet. Like
it should, market value, after repair value is a term that we use a lot in the business, but after repair value on this home will be what, just over 500?
It'll be for sure north of 5, so probably somewhere in the 5 to 550 range.
Yeah. So super excited about that project. It one cool thing when we were out at the project was we got some landscaping done right off the bat. We got the clean out done right off the bat. The number of neighbors who came over to us and just said, "Hey, thanks. This house has been an eyesore for a very long time." Evidently, even when the previous owners still lived there, it wasn't well kept. So, which, given its condition, I don't know that that's terribly surprising, but it's exciting to be able to allow a home to return to what it should be.
Yeah, that's a huge part of what we do here, is yes, we get to help the family who is going through a tough time and needs to step away from the home. But this home does have auxiliary effects in terms of the neighborhood as well. And if I own the house next door to this one, I know my house value is affected because of it. So the fact that we're able to help clean up the house for the neighborhood's sake as well, make it more for someone to move in there and not have to worry about what's going on at that house. It does a lot for the whole community there. It really does.
Right. And we get to repair an artificial skylight, nature induced skylight.
I don't even know what this means. Please tell me.
There's a hole in the roof. So it's a nature induced skylight.
Nature induced skylight. So it has like water effects and heat effects and maybe some stars at night, things like that. That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool.
So those
it's like the even better than the Sphere, right? In Vegas, you're gonna get I don't know. I don't know. We're talking about firsthand experiences.
That's here. Right. That's right. Guys, definitely drop your questions on the platforms. We are watching those and happy to take up your questions. As we mentioned, very, very busy couple of weeks at CLT Buyers. It might be nice to actually travel next week and catch our breath just a touch. So maybe, fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed.
What
We're
else?
dealing with time zones, so you never know.
That's right.
But what else? We had a very office hours last week.
Mm-hmm.
We had a discussion about scope of work on projects.
Yep.
And determining what to do with the rehab and what not to do with the rehab. And I think so. The one we were just talking about on that we bought at the courthouse. There's enough room in there with the spread to be able to make all the choices that we would like to make in the home, most likely.
Yep.
But we are buying another one on Monday that has a lot of equity, but not a lot of equity if we plan to refinance and keep it. So maybe just talk quickly about some of the things that you'll choose to do in a property you're trying to keep and some things you'll choose not to do if that refinance line is kind of tight.
Yeah. So I think when we first get started in the business, we'll watch, like an HGTV show, and we'll see them go in there with sledgehammers and blow everything out and buy all new stuff. And that, of course, is really fun for TV, but that's not the reality of what we get to do in our business, or at least what we choose to do in our business. So there's plenty of, we said this after office hours, we said this. It always feels to us when we manage our projects effectively and we're watching the budget that there's one more thing we would have liked to have done from a budget perspective, but we couldn't price in. And I think if you're walking away from a project feeling that way, you've probably done it the right way. So for example, things that sometimes fall in that range is we'll have an HVAC system serviced instead of replaced, right? The units may look older, but they're still performing, so we're probably going to leave those in place. Water heater might fall into that same category. We may choose to leave a certain tile floor in place instead of pulling it out. We may choose to keep kitchen cabinets in place. Those are all things that, if we were just leading completely with our ego and just wanting to let our artistic expression go crazy, right, we would do all those things. But so popcorn ceilings sometimes will stay in place. So there's always just like little elements that when we look at removing, again, going to popcorn ceilings, when we look at the cost of removing the popcorn ceilings, is that worth the return we're going to get? Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. If it's a rental we're keeping, we're definitely not removing it. That would not be a choice we would generally make.
Why?
It just doesn't affect cash flow.
So you're telling me that if I'm paying $1,200 a month and then the landlord decides to scrape my ceilings, he shouldn't be able to charge me $1,400 a month now?
We haven't
I would
found
agree with you.
We haven't found the tenant who's willing to pay that yet. There's always someone out there who might be willing. That's a feature they look for. I want a 3-bed, 2-bath without popcorn ceiling, right? Like there's someone out
You
there.
bring up a good point right now. I think a lot of people rehab properties to the features that they think the tenants want, rather than the features the tenant needs.
Yeah.
On some level, if the tenant is looking for a customized house, they should buy a house
and do the things
that they want. My favorite example of this is Nest thermostats. They're super nice. I love mine. It's cool. It regulates it for me, so I never have to change the temperature. For 30 years, I survived without it. And all I saw was the little number on the little tiny panel. And it worked just the same.
That's right.
And yes, you might get one more tenant who's like, hey, these guys are technologically updated. I want this one. My guess is if it matters to them, they probably either have one already or have found something else that compensates for the fact of not having one. And you want to be making decisions that just allow people to live comfortably and securely, but you don't need to turn it into a social house that has a million things for them to enjoy. That's the benefit of renting, is you get to make it your own way as long as you don't physically change the house.
Right. So those things are features that sometimes we would put in. A Nest thermostat's a great example of where if it's going to be a rental, we would never adapt that.
Never.
That wouldn't be a decision we would make. If it were going on the market, we may choose to make that change.
Probably every time.
Yeah.
Again, we talk about cash flow dictates a lot. If I'm making $1,000 a month cash flow, which is very difficult here to do here in Charlotte, I can be a little bit more loose with my rehab choices. Whether or not it's smart or not, you can be more loose. But if I'm cash flowing $200-300 a door, and monthly, how if I were to replace a Nest thermostat, that's a month of income.
That's right.
Like that's a full month of what you would be normally receiving.
And so,
If
do we
you
want to
have to
lose?
do appliances, that's a whole year of income.
And so, do you want to give up 8% of the return? Right?
Yeah.
Are you going to give up 8% of the return to put a Nest thermostat on the wall? That doesn't make a lot of sense.
Doesn't make a lot of sense, even if it marginally increased the rent. But it's like a Nest thermostat will not increase the rent.
Right.
Windows that are more heavily insulated, those are things that you can consider over time because you'll save energy costs and these other benefits to it. But things that just look nice or things that are aesthetically pleasing is just not necessary in a rental.
Right. And so then when we put on our hat as the flipper or as someone who's preparing a house for the retail market, we've just got to make those decisions in ways that are effective. I had someone walk through Amity. So that's a house that we sold for above market.
Mhm.
Had a neighbor come. I don't know if I've ever shared the story with you. Had a neighbor stop by the property one time when I was out there putting some mulch down, or I don't know. It was right before we went to market and something had to get done and I was there. Had a neighbor stop by and he was like, "Hey, do you mind if I look around?" Yeah, whatever. It's fine. Like they want to
Be nosy,
be nosy. Yeah. Be nosy and they want to see the transition and all that.
which is cool. Yeah.
Fine. And there's the possibility that they may know someone who may be interested in the house. So we're generally pretty accommodating when that happens. So the guy walks through and then he comes back out and he has a list of like 3 or 4 different things like, I can't believe that you guys would not do X, Y, Z, whatever.
You haven't told me this.
And,
what were they? Do you remember?
Yeah. One of them was the stairway going up to the attic.
Mhm.
We didn't change it.
You mean like the pull down?
The pull down. And he was just, I can't believe at this price point that you wouldn't have replaced that. And if you remember, the way that sealed wasn't a perfect mate, right? Like it didn't mate with the ceiling line exactly. So there was a little bit of a gap. And the guy just like, he really was like almost aggressive to the point with me about it. And, I'm not going to argue with the guy. Hey, you make a great point, is all I really said. That house sold above our list price. So evidently, it didn't affect the market's opinion of value.
Great point. So I think one of the pitfalls that a lot of people who are not in the space regularly fall into is they think that when a property gets rehabbed, it's rehabbed to a new build standard.
Right.
Everything is done for 2023 materials, 2023 finishes, 2023 expectations. And financially, that will never work. There's not enough room in the budget to do that unless we're getting properties cheaper than we already are. So when people are buying a rehabbed home, it is not like buying a new house in a development or buying a house that was built 2 years ago in a new development. The bones are older, the vents are older, the returns are older, the whatever's used to hold up the house foundation wise is older.
The joists, the slabs, like whatever that happens to
all
be.
that,
Yeah.
and all of that affects what you can do in the house. And at some point, there's a law of diminishing returns with what you can put into it. And our job is to find the things that are the easiest for a new homeowner to recognize and choose whether or not they want to deal with it. Like, yes, it wasn't a perfect mate, but we also knew that there wasn't any airflow issues.
That's right.
So it wasn't something that
there's no draft coming down.
There's no
or
draft.
anything,
there was no leaks in the roof, nothing to cause concern other than the fact that if you're my height, you're going to see it a little bit easier than if you're someone like Christine's height. Like, that's really the type of decision that we saw as just not worth the cost. And you and I are both fully open to the fact that if the buyer came to us and said, hey, that isn't mating perfectly, for me to buy it at this price, you need to either fix it or give me a concession so I can fix it, you and I are both taking that
every
any
time.
day. Any day.
Every time. But it's just having to walk that line between where our job is not to create perfect homes that are Chip and Joanna Gaines like ready, right? Like that's not our job. Our job is to make the most intelligent decisions that the market's going to appreciate. And at some point, to exactly the words you said, there are diminishing returns. A diminishing return in that house that we flipped would have been replacing the ceiling, the stairs and the ceiling. Would we have liked to have changed it? Of course, sure. But from a business perspective, is that a wise decision for us? Probably not. And I think back to like the whole conversation from office hours, it was fun to kind of walk through those different nuances.
Yeah. And this method of how you and I choose to rehab a home is based off of the type of homes we choose to rehab. And I want to make this point. Like, we have some friends in the space that do insanely high end rehabs, and they're awesome, but they're doing projects that have insanely high price points. So if I'm paying $1.2 million for a house in Elizabeth or Chantilly or something like that, everything does need to be done. That's the level of money that's being put into it. That's the level of the neighborhood. That's what people are paying for. But if you're trying to buy a home in a transitioning neighborhood where things are not all the same, where there's some very old homes and there's some very new homes, you can't go from black to white.
That's
you
right.
can't go from 200,000 to 800,000
Yep.
like Elizabeth sells for.
Yeah.
You have to go from 200 to 300, from 300 to 400,
Because there's
400
still
to
a cap in the
500.
neighborhood. If we could get like that property specifically, if the top of the market had been 650, we would have made different decisions.
That's right.
Unfortunately, we're bound by the economics of it.
We were talking to someone yesterday during office hours who brought up a point where they're trying to refi a property where they went $200,000 over their rehab budget. And they're arguing that there are some homes 5 miles away that match that price point. And the thing is, I 100% agree. I think we would all agree that there are homes that can match that price point. But will someone pay $700,000-800,000 for a home when the other homes in the neighborhood are selling for $350,000 or $400,000? Your house would have to have some unbelievable amenities, and the buyer would have to look past a whole bunch of other things. Because once you get into these price points, you're not just paying for the house.
That's
You're
right.
paying for the school district. You're paying for the HOA. You're paying for
The locality to Publix.
Exactly. Like, do you want to live closer to a Whole Foods, or do you want to live closer to a Dollar General? Like, all of these things impact the choices that we make as flippers in the home as well. So you and I look for more first-time home buyers. You know, we're looking for homes that are on the lesser side of the range for sales in Charlotte. So if we're offering a lower price point to people to be able to become homeowners, some of the byproducts of that is you're not getting the same quality of finishes in a home as you would in Chantilly.
And we're not getting the price per square foot of it either, you know?
Exactly.
So, yeah, but that's the dynamic that makes our task interesting, you know? So there are decisions we make and lines we draw sometimes. And I think if we're really disciplined, that's what we do. So then yesterday at office hours, we pivoted from, so the previous conversation was, you know, how do we work through a scope of work and how are those decisions made and how do we work with contractors and how do we manage payments? So that was the week before. So yesterday at office hours, we were talking about how do I put on my landlord hat and work through elements of property management effectively. And that was really fun. I think, you know, our thesis generally is that folks should hire property managers generally to help them in that process, and that's generally the most effective way to do that. Having said that, there still are some best practices that can be pretty productive. And so we walk through, you know, how do you work with tenants? How do you have communications with tenants? All of that type of stuff. So that conversation was really interesting, I thought.
Still a lot of ways to get it done. Still, you and I are property management guys, but there are people who are a little bit more diligent in terms of keeping up with things. And um, there are a lot of people that just want to do it. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. Just make sure that you're up to date on the laws, collect payments the right way, make it easy for you and for your tenants, and things should be pretty good.
And then don't be a softie, right?
You can't be a softie if you're a property manager, right,
For
Matt?
sure. Thankfully, our property management team does a great job of kind of being the firewall for us between the tenants' concerns and our interests as owners. And so that's one of the benefits of having a property management team. Did I have a question come in about how we make decisions about whether we're going to keep a property, rent it, flip it, wholesale it? How do we make that decision in our business?
How long you got? Okay. I'll try and keep it simple. So Ed and I try to keep everything we can. So if there's an opportunity to keep it, we will. The determining factor of that is the total cost basis. So as we were kind of talking about earlier, after I finish rehabbing a property, if I can't refinance all of the money that I've put into it so far back out, and I'm going to have money stuck in the deal, that's a time where you and I will look at each other and be like, maybe this isn't one worth keeping. Now, if there's $5,000 or $10,000 stuck in there, maybe we will. But some of the flips that we do to sell to retail, we would have $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 stuck in there if we tried to keep it. So getting as much money of our capital back on the refi is the main determining factor of whether or not we will keep it. If that's the case, if we're not keeping it, then scale of the rehab is the next decision. If it is a hefty rehab, we're more inclined to wholesale it unless the location is great. At the same time, if the location is just not local to us, if we have 3 projects going on in Northeast Charlotte and the next opportunity for a heavy rehab comes into Southwest Charlotte, we may choose not to take on that one just because all of our crews are elsewhere and the logistics of jumping back and forth may be a little bit too much. So circling back, if we can get our money out after a refi, we keep it. If we can't, we're going to flip it. And if the rehab is too extensive or the location is just not local enough, most likely we're going to wholesale it or wholesale it.
And I guess the other part of that question of, is it project specific? Is it timeline related? Is it related to our workload? We have an idea in our business that is diagnosis without examination is malpractice, which means we've got to take every project at its value, at its face, and make decisions about what's best for the business based on the capital we have available, based on the time resources we have available, based on, again, you said location. So how is that going to consume resources and make the best decision possible? There's plenty of deals we've wholesaled that we wish we had held. There's plenty of deals we've held that maybe we should have wholesaled. But on mass, I think we've made those decisions pretty effectively. And I think it's contributed to the effectiveness of the business.
Absolutely. It's absolutely project specific. It's absolutely timeline specific. It's all work, like all of those factor in. But they're, at the end of the day, if we can keep it, we will. And there have been times in the past where we've made quite a bit of money by flipping it. However, yes, you make that money today, but if you hold on to it, you will still get that same amount of money, hopefully more later. So when we're choosing about doing flips, a lot of it is to just keep operational capital coming in so that the business doesn't suffer because the portfolio is getting so much attention.
So I want to hit you. We're getting towards the end of Power Hour, so I just want to hit 2 things. Had a question come in about how did we scale, from a point where we were kind of doing one flip at a time to now we have five or depending how you count, 5 or 6 different flips on the board. Really what's been effective for us is being able to empower, specifically Christine is doing our project management. So being able to empower her to kind of just take the lead on that. If it required, you or I to just explicitly give it our attention, I don't think we could be as effective as we are. So the takeaway for those who are kind of observing is outsourcing to generate more hands into the business is a very valuable thing. Hence, that's why we're doing like the transaction coordination business and why we think that's valuable for people. So being able to bring in other sets of hands to help lift things is really, really valuable. But I do want to get to that second question. You had an opportunity Thursday night to go to the meetup about the UDO laws that are changing in Charlotte or have changed in Charlotte. Any key takeaways from that discussion?
Yeah, the first off, the commissioner for zoning, his name's Solomon. He was a real treat. He overshared. He was over communicable. He's super easy to get in touch with. He's actively working with investors to make sure that they're able to maximize the use of the land. It did not feel for a second like investors and city planners were on opposite ends. It felt very much like they are trying to work with us to make sure that we maximize land to the hope that Charlotte as a city has as well. So that was really cool. It didn't feel like we were talking to an enemy or a bureaucrat. It felt very much like we were talking to a partner, which I loved. One of the cool things, generally speaking, on that note, is he was very open to creativity on making things fit. So he was talking about how some people with a little bit of a larger plot of land are putting right of ways in there, whether it's a cul-de-sac or a straight road that allows frontage to be realized within the lot, not on the front,
Not just the public right
not
away.
just the public right away. So if you were to put a road down the middle of your lot, you could theoretically put a duplex on each side of it because the frontage is satisfied rather than having to go
Just
common
across the
way
front. Yeah.
Yep. So that was really, really interesting. Also, just talking about some of the special use cases and how they tried to draw everything blanket covered by rezoning districts, but that wasn't possible. So there are going to be some unique use cases on some of the more historical areas, some of the areas out near Monroe, some of the more outskirt areas is seemed what he was hinting towards. But needless to say, that told me that being ahead of the UDO understanding of density is already a benefit, but then knowing the areas where there's going to be even some nuance within that new ordinance is a great opportunity to really take advantage of a changing market. So basic takeaways from that were, one, there's going to be a lot of creativity that seems to be supported by the city. And two is the city will be an active participant in helping you solve those problems. So reach out to them and help them become a part of your decision-making process.
I think that first, great summary. I think that points out one other dynamic that's happened recently in Charlotte that I think is going to have real impacts on valuation and growth of areas. So Charlotte, Mecklenburg have made what they're calling social districts, which are basically specific geographies where folks can travel from one bar to another with an open container, much like some other cities have done, Charleston, Savannah, some of these other cities. So not far from our office, the Plaza area, right on Central Avenue. So that's a minute from our office, a minute and a half from our office, maybe, is going to be one of the first in the city. And I think that we're going to see more growth of some of these casual dining, and the bars may adjust a little bit in their experience. And I'm excited about what that will do to growth in those areas. And it just reminds us that being present to how these changes are happening, how these ordinances are changing different lifestyle choices, whether it's in the Plaza area of Charlotte or down in South End or some of these things, that those will continue to drive innovation and growth from a valuation perspective.
Boom.
Boom, drop the mic. So I know we went like super fast moving through a lot of those items. We've just had so much going on. For those of you who aren't following us on the socials, hit a follow on the Facebook or Instagrams. We'd love to have you guys come along with us. No Power Hour next week. We are going to be traveling for our mastermind. For those of you who join us in person for office hours, that also won't be happening this week. So if you guys do show up, you're going to need to bring some cookies for Christina or something, because she'll be the one holding down the fort while we're traveling. So I don't know. Any last words? Any last couple thoughts?
I think really the only thing I'll say is we are heading into slow season in terms of buyer and seller activity, especially on market activity. Things kind of slow down a little bit towards the holidays. And I just encourage you guys to not be one of those people. It may feel like you're spinning your wheels a little bit and things aren't getting done in the timeframes you want due to the slowdown. But we have had a lot of success in the past of building those relationships up during that time. And when people come back from the new year, first, second week of January, they are ready to move. So right now is the time where you're really building the foundation for the start of your next year, and focus just as much on having a strong start to Q1 as a strong finish to Q4. So
Q1 always feels healthy for us. Some folks will come back in January and they'll just start ramping marketing back up and things like that. And then it's really not February or March till the deal hits, and that can feel very kind of feast or famine like. And we've done a great job over the last couple of years of just really keeping our foot on the gas. That finally that week between Christmas and New Year, sometimes we'll be out of office, but we'll run right up to it. I mean, I remember you and I have sat in our offices, December 23rd.
That's right.
And, worked through
not making calls, but working through things
and making sure that we're positioning ourselves as effectively as possible for the new year. And at this point, it's the preparation that we do now that's going to really push off where you go into 2024. So love it. With that, guys, we'll wrap Power Hour for this week. Thanks so much for joining us. If you have questions, feel free to put them on the replays. We do pay attention to those comments and do try to respond to them. Other than that, guys, we just appreciate you. Keep following the journey. See you real soon.
Happy Halloween.